Uh, I'm Emma Mansell. I am a software engineer at the New York Public Library, and today I'm here to talk to you about the library, about our tech, and about how we ended up using Next.js. I'm really excited to be here, not just because of all the other fantastic speakers that you're about to hear, but I grew up here. I grew up in Oakland, right across the bay. Yeah, some Oakland representation. So it's really nice to be home. I did move to New York, though. I moved to New York to work for the New York Public Library. It was my dream to work for a library that was in so many movies. That was the whole point, especially Sex and the City Staircase. Getting to see that every day, incredible. No, I'm kidding. The New York Public Library is more than a film set to me and to many other people. We are the largest public library in the nation. Over 18 million people come into one of our branches every year, whether that's to check out a book, to use a computer, to do research in our archives, to attend a language class. The list really goes on. We have over 54 million items in our collections, and you know the saying, with great collections comes great responsibility. It is our mission to provide free and open access to every single one of those items. So when the internet rolled around about 100 years after the library was founded, it meant that we had another incredible way to reach our patrons. So if you've been wondering, what does a software engineer do at a library? The answer is actually quite a lot. All of these websites and apps are built to create access to our collections on every level. Our tech needs to support a kindergartner reading their first book as much as it does an academic who's here to work at one of the top research institutions in the country. Today I'm going to talk particularly about digital collections, because that's the website that I work on. Digital collections is a really special site. You can think about it as everything at the library that's digital, that's not ebooks, right? So prints, photographs, videos, audio, etc. This website has over 1 million items on it, and we add more from our collections every day. It allows items to be searched and cited and displayed in a lot of detail. It can be used casually, like to look at fun stuff, but it's also a serious research tool. I thought you guys might like this picture. It's a map of America with California as an island. Clearly, we're not using that one anymore. But in many ways, digital collections expresses the mission of the library in a way that could only be digital, right? It's a really valuable resource because even if you are in person in New York and you can see these items in person in our branches, it takes a lot of time and coordination to get them all in one place. Having them available on this website means that anyone can look at them anytime. It also means we have a lot of cool stuff that anyone can look at. This is Charles Dickens' paper knife with a cat's paw on it. I think it was his cat. And that's a picture of Elliot Tiber for his Woodstock memoir. So a lot of cool stuff on this website. I've already said access about 20 times in this presentation. I'll probably say it about 100 more, so get ready. But that is really what we're all about at the library, across all of our websites, not just digital collections. And we mean it in every sense of the word, like creating access by having things available online, but also by making every page of every website tailored to meet WCAG standards so every user can access them. So we are interested in performance and SEO, like other websites, but because we see those as actually part of access, right? If it takes forever for an item's metadata to load, then it's really difficult to do research and the site isn't performant. If a patron is Googling items that are in our collections and what we have doesn't even come up, then you can't really say it's easy to find what's in our collections. So we do care about this stuff, and we do care about optimizing it. What we don't care about is making money. We have about 80 people in our whole digital department. That's including product managers and designers. So there's probably organizations here today that have that number of engineers on like one single app, not to mention all of the stuff that we have. But what I hope to get at today in this presentation is how we use Next.js, not how you might use it at a big organization like that. We have a really small team, we have limited resources, and our priority is access almost to the exclusion of everything else. So I hope to show that Next works for that use case as well. But before I get into Next.js, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our stack. So on top of, or really under all those apps and websites, we also have our own open source design system called Reservoir. It's a library of extensible React components. And I can see in some of your faces, you're like, you had an amazing opportunity to make a pun about libraries with the title of that library. But don't worry. We named it Reservoir after a reservoir that we were built on top of, actually, the Croton Reservoir. They had to drain it and apparently get rid of a bunch of bodies. And then we built the library on top of it. And guess where that image came from? Digital collection. We have a bunch of components in our library, stuff like the hero, button, etc. And each of these is individually vetted for accessibility, and then, of course, combined together, create a consistent visual experience for all of our users across the digital world of NYPL. Or at least that's the goal. But even though we have this awesome open source design system, a lot of our sites couldn't even use it because they weren't compatible with React. In fact, as a department, we're on a bunch of stacks, and a lot of them are pretty outdated. So the old digital collections website was a great example. This site was built in 2013 in Ruby on Rails. And even though it is performant, I think it does look like it was built in 2013. And it wasn't meeting our accessibility standards, more importantly. Short of taking you through a whole accessibility review on this site, I think the font size, the color contrast in some of those cards, you can already tell it needed work. So we wanted to update the design of the site to be more modern, more accessible, and we wanted to do that using our own design system. So we were sort of faced with a decision. We needed to pick an established Node.js framework, and we were essentially picking between Next and Express. And we ended up picking Next, so I'm at the right conference. And here are a couple of reasons why. First of all, Next is super lightweight. It works out of the box. We don't have the manpower to be doing elaborate custom configuration on the front end, so we really wanted it to be straightforward. We also knew that we weren't updating our back end, and that's important. Do any of you guys know the song, like, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill, like the Schoolhouse Rock song, about how a bill becomes a law in Congress? If you were going to write a song like that about how an item gets obtained by the library, processed, cataloged, digitized, and eventually brought to the front end of digital collections, that would be the longest song in the world. It would be like American Pie. This is a simplified diagram of how that happens. So some very smart engineers with library science degrees already built that for us. We're not messing with it. So we wanted to just have something that was going to click into place. Next.js also really elegantly does hybrid rendering. We know we wanted to move to server-side rendering. I'll speak a little more about that, but we wanted something that combined both approaches really nicely. And then finally, and actually most importantly, we had developers that already had experience with Next.js versions 9, 10, 11. And so even though Next has actually changed a lot since those versions, we knew it was a great place to start, and that we could collaborate and share knowledge as digital collections and other sites, the library, move towards using Next.js. So, okay, we had a legacy Ruby on Rails app. We had to get it into a fresh, clean Next.js app. We basically split it like along URL lines, which I think is probably pretty common. Our first phase was the home page and the about page. And originally we had a vision of saying, okay, like let's take Ruby controller functions one-to-one and map them to Next.js API routes. We dropped that pretty quickly. I think one of the things that is great but also terrible about Next is how magical the data fetching is. We couldn't really apply the MVC pattern to it, and it wasn't really worth it anyways. We found just starting with a blank slate was a lot clearer. It was also a huge help for the developer experience just to have file-based routing and have those pages already scaffolded out, and we could see the whole project already existing in the repo, even though we had redirects set up for the pages we hadn't worked on yet. Once we had completed the home page, we had a bit of a moment to consider. We had started in the pages router, but the app router was out of beta, and we thought this might be a good time to move over. So we found ourselves in a situation that I think maybe a lot of people in this room might have been in or will be in, which is thinking, should we move to the app router? We were kind of on the fence because we couldn't use the app router in the way that it was really intended. That is to say, with server components. If you've been listening very carefully, you might have seen this already coming down the pike, but we had a very big obstacle to using server components, which was our very own design system. We were migrating the site so that we could use all of these components we had already built, but none of them worked server-side because our design system is built on top of Chakra UI, which is a CSS and JS library. Everything had to be client-side. So we ended up essentially recreating get server-side props in the app router for every single one of our pages. We're basically grabbing the data on the page component, a server component, and just passing it immediately into a page-level component that's wrapped around, and that pink circle is our design provider. So in other words, our goal was to move the use client directive down as far as possible. We just didn't get very far. But I'm happy that we did it anyways, because there's other benefits in Next 14 that are not really about server components, and we really enjoy those as well. Router caching has been huge for us. We have universal headers and footers, and so that really helps with page load times. The error boundary, which existed in previous versions, but is really clever and convenient and has saved us a lot of work with error handling, knowing it's all being caught by that boundary in one place. And then finally, improved documentation. For us, we found that loading and suspense was a lot clearer in Next 14 in the docs, and we were able to deploy it that much more easily. But all of these reasons actually paled in terms of like the symbolic meaning of this decision. We're a nonprofit, things move pretty slowly, and so for us it was worth it to open up that conversation of like, how can we use server components? We believe this is the future of web development, this is how it's going to work, and so we have the pieces in place in this project to use server components once our design library is ready for them. So for us, it was huge to even open that conversation in the digital department. But pages router, app router, all of this stuff really pales in terms of the experience we had actually using Next, which we didn't even anticipate when we picked it over Express. And that would be its integration with Vercel Preview. Other people will say this better than I can, but iteration velocity is huge, and you don't realize how huge until you don't have it. It's critical, especially for a project like this. At Digital Collections, we're responsible for creating the best user experience we can for the capital P public. Our goal is literally to serve everyone. That's the public and public library, and that means that we have a lot of stakeholders. So using Vercel Preview means that this process can be accelerated like tenfold because we have these links that we can immediately send both internally and externally and say, what do you think of this? What would you change about this? And the decision-making that has to happen with every minor change goes that much faster, and developers can then work that much faster to fix the issues that we have. And that's how we ended up really improving the accessibility of the site. So this is our new site. This is built with Next, and I do think it's a lot prettier, a lot cleaner. We're really happy with the performance as well. But accessibility has also improved, which you don't have to take my word for. I asked our accessibility consultant to give me a quote. And you'll notice here that all of these things are small stuff, right? And the small stuff is what is made that much easier when you have Vercel Preview and you can get feedback instantly instead of the tedious process of spinning up a preview environment and getting it to a bunch of people. So what are our Next.js steps? I hope I'm the last person to make that joke today. But we are using Next Image. Like, I have an open PR for it right now. We're a site that displays images, so it makes sense that we would use Next Image. It's more a question of how can we integrate it, again, with our design system and get it working. But we have very high hopes for the optimizations that will allow us, especially on the pages that are displaying like thousands of images. And then, of course, what I've sort of been circling around this entire time, having server components interwoven with our client components on an as-needed basis, instead of this sort of insurmountable client-side boundary at the top of our project. So yeah, that's Digital Collections. That's my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I will be taking questions, and you can also go to those links if you're interested in seeing how we use Next. I think someone will run mics if you want. Question? Yeah.
So you said pretty much like you migrated this app, which appeared it was built in 2013. What was the biggest hurdle from migrating code that was that old to a newer framework like Next.js?
I would say the biggest hurdle was getting used to Next, really, like Next data fetching. That was totally unfamiliar. I think I was coming in as a developer that was mainly experienced with, like, I had my basis in React, and so it was maybe easier for me to get into that, but we had a lot of developers that had been used to working in Ruby on Rails. So I think just like that immediate learning curve was the toughest part.
Awesome, thank you.
Hello. Hi.
Oh, I can't see you. I can hear you. Hi.
I have a question. So previously you were sharing that before migrating, you care about how this migration is going to improve performance and SEO, right? And then I was just wondering, can you share the SEO performance metrics that you see before and after migration? Like, is the core metrics, core web vital metrics improved, or if it's the clicks improved, things like that?
Yeah, well, it's actually a hard question to answer right now since we're sort of in the middle of the migration. We're not totally done yet. But the interesting part is that we do have like kind of insane SEO right now because like the items that we have are like, it's the thing, it's the public library's item. And so we really want to maintain that. That's been a huge focus for us in terms of like maintaining URL structure and all of that. But yeah, I really can't answer yet because we haven't completed the migration and we still have the site sort of like partially up on one.
Thanks.
Hi. Behind the pillar.
Hi.
Your design system preventing you from migrating resonated greatly with me. Do you have any thoughts on how you plan to migrate your design system to be server-side compatible?
Yeah, well, I have lots of thoughts, and no one is really interested in hearing them yet. But I think mainly we first need to get everyone that's using the design system to be ready to use server components. I think for us, that's our first step. Like I was saying, we have a bunch of stacks. And so having like a unified stack is, I think, definitely the precursor that we're still trying to get to. And then beyond that, I guess, yeah, there's so much still unknown. It feels like we're steps behind in that case, but yeah, good luck to you as well in that in that department.
What about hosting? Did you self-host or did you use Next.js for hosting?
Yeah, so we deploy with AWS, not Vercel. That is a choice that was made long before I arrived, and I think it mainly has to do, I'm sure you guys have heard about like the British Library being hacked. We have like pretty intense security concerns, and so that configuration is already set up on AWS. So that already exists, and also we're not sure that Vercel actually will allow us to have the security configuration that we would need, but that would first need to be addressed if we were going to start deploying with Vercel. But clearly, we're already huge fans of Vercel Preview, so I, as a front-end developer, would love that.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So what kind of security concerns?
You're asking the wrong person, but I'm also not sure I should say. But yeah, it's mainly we really are afraid of getting hacked. We have a lot of people's personal information, and that would be an issue. Digital Collections is not a site that has logins on it, so I think if anywhere was going to deploy with Vercel, it probably would be us. But we have, the catalog sites and stuff. Those have a lot of stuff that we want to protect.
Hey, did the team consider migrating the website one page at a time, or is it going to be a launch once every page has been migrated?
That's a great question. So we do have our homepage up like currently, and you can switch between them with just a banner, but we're actually setting up a reverse proxy right now so that you can have them existing at the same time. And so the pages that we do have on Next are are up, and then the ones that aren't are still available. So that's our launch plan right now, is just sort of going in those URL chunks, like page by page, like you were saying, and having the reverse proxy handle the rest.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you so much. You mentioned you were hosting on AWS, so I'm curious, what are some of the problems you ran into or things you worked around for hosting Next on AWS as opposed to something like Vercel, or these sort of like platforms that it's maybe not designed for but is more commonly used on?
I don't know if we had any problems that really stood out to me in the hosting of it. I think it's been pretty straightforward, but I also just don't have extensive details on it. Again, the security stuff that we have going on makes it more complicated on that end, that I wouldn't be able to get into really. Okay, awesome. If there's no more questions, thank you all so much for listening. Oh, we have one more.
What has been the most rewarding part of the migration process so far?
Thanks, it's a great question. It's been really satisfying. I think a lot of the pages, using them can be so difficult that it is exciting to see that even me as a developer, I'm not a librarian, I'm not a researcher, it's already so much easier to use these pages, and we're really excited to get to see how patrons can use them in their work. I think that's definitely been the most satisfying part.
Thank you.
What was I saying?
Hey, you'd mentioned that one of the core tenets was the access part of the library. Can you speak a little bit more on how you're doing your accessibility verifications?
Sure. So we have an accessibility consultant that reviews pretty much everything that we put out. And then also, of course, we're using Lighthouse and that sort of thing as a developer side check. But yeah, that's a evolving process. We want to be getting as much user feedback as possible. So we're always soliciting that both in our design process as well as after it's already been released. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. I want to know, before this migration, how did you estimate the performance and SEO gains you were expecting to get out of this migration? And post this migration, how did you measure what fraction of those were realized?
Yeah, so again, we're sort of in the midst of the migration, so we haven't measured how successful it is so far, although we're it's looking good on the pages that have gone. But I think we were happy with our performance. So much of the site is, like I was saying, the back end. We have a public API that serves this, if anyone can look at that as well, and that has all of the information on it. So a lot of the performance has to do with the back end API. We just want to consume that data as straightforwardly as possible and display it. So yeah, I think we're still in the measuring process is my answer to that.
Yeah, quick follow-up. And before you started off the migration, did you conduct any sort of estimations that this is the amount of gains you are expecting? Or was it pretty obvious that this would have to be done?
It was kind of a question of we need to use React. We're not good, even if it makes our performance worse, but we're going to be using it, so that's where we're going no matter what. So it wasn't a question of we're doing this migration to improve our performance necessarily.
So you mentioned accessibility. Would you say there were parts of the Next.js framework that help you improve accessibility?
Well, frankly, with any framework, we were going to have to do these accessibility fixes. But what I'm saying is that with Vercel Preview, it made it a lot faster and a lot easier on the developer side. And I think that that's the kind of momentum that you need in order to really focus on a fantastic user experience. I think they've already said so many times, a great developer experience leads to a great user experience. And that's definitely been how we've used Next.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys all so much for listening. I really appreciate it.